I'm Jeanette Pincus, and this is Tuesday, January 13th, 2025. And I get the wonderful opportunity to actually interview my cousin, Minton Rosenhouse, for him to share his story and a little bit about his life, how he even got here to our Dallas Jewish community, and what he's done all these years. So, Minty, thank you so much. This is very special for me to get to do this.
Thank you, Jen.
First off, I'd like to begin to tell me more about your family, your background. As much as you have heard or know, it could be great-grandparents, grandparents, like where they're from and what you know of them.
Well, on my father's side, my father was born in Kishinev, outside of Minsk in Russia. He came over when he was a year and a half old.
What was his name?
David Lazar Rosenhouse. And he and his brother Moses and sister Annie were came with their parents. My grandfather was Louis and my grandmother was Minerva. And they came over and they landed in Pensacola. And my grandfather and his brother Baruch Rosenhouse started the first electric power company in Pensacola. And then they lived in Milton, M-I-L-T-O-N, Florida. And then my Aunt Dora was born a year later. So there were, 4 brothers and sisters. And a year after that, my grandfather developed appendicitis, and it ruptured, and the hospital was in Pensacola. They had to take the banana boat across, and he died on the way. So that left my grandmother with 4 young children, all under 5 years old. And, there was arguments between her and her brother-in-law. And he said, well, you don't own any of this company. And here she is, basically alone in the world. She had cousins up in Connecticut, but, they were in the same shape as her. And leave it to me, when my uncle turned 10 and my dad was 7, they started a movie house. And that's how they supported the family. And then my uncle went on to my Uncle Moses became an attorney. And the family moved to Miami and bought a compound. He was successful. And he insisted on my dad go to law school. And my dad wanted to be a physician. So my dad went to University of Miami Law School. He was in the first graduating class. And then he went up to Gainesville and did his medicine at Shands. And so he was a JD-MD, which was very rare in those days. And his practice was defending doctors accused of malpractice and real estate. When I was 13, which would have been 1963, my father decided he didn't like Miami anymore. It was getting too big for him. And we were going to move up to Merritt Island outside of Cocoa Beach, and he started a law office. But we never made it to move up because he had a heart attack and died.
What age was that?
He had April 6th of 64, he had an aortic dissection, which then left my mother pretty much in the same condition that my grandmother was left in. Because my uncle and his 2 sisters said, well, Lottie, you're not entitled to anything. David never did any work. And, this was a nasty situation to the point that, I basically put myself through school. I worked as a manager of a movie theater while going full-time to University of Miami. And then I got a job as the manager of the casino on board the old new Bahama Star for Eastern Steamship Company. So I would fly back and forth between Nassau and Miami twice a week. I'd work the night, get on Air Bahama in the morning, be at University of Miami for classes, and back and forth. This lasted a couple of years.
Going back a little bit, when you were younger,
Yeah.
growing up, like even before you were 13, like what was life like there? Like being Jewish in an area like that, and the school, what was
My
going on
dad
there?
was, my uncle and dad were the founding president and vice president of Congregation Beth David, which was the largest conservative synagogue in South Florida,
And what town was that in?
Miami.
Okay.
And being Jewish was, everybody around me was Jewish. I really didn't, the only non-Jewish people I really knew were a couple of my dad's clients who were our friends, and our maid and houseman and chauffeur. That, I didn't realize there was a real non-Jewish world, because, I went to Hebrew Academy. I, was isolated. My parents' friends were mostly Jewish. And, in Florida, you don't have to, assimilate Judaism. It's not like, and that's why when I got married to Marilyn, and then we decided to move here, in Dallas, you have to join organizations to be Jewish. In Miami, it's the cult, at that time, it was the culture. I don't know how, today it's no longer the culture, because most of the Jews have moved up to Broward County.
I remember, like, your mom was such a wonderful cook, and boy, the Jewish cooking and all the things that she did, so you must have had a lot of that going on in your home.
Oh, yeah. We, actually, my mom learned to cook from my grandmother, her mom, and bake, but really,
And what was her maiden name, that family's
Wiener.
name?
My grandparents were Izzy and Molly Wiener, and she had a brother and a sister. Actually, I had two brothers, but the first brother died of influenza before everybody else was born. And so she had a brother, Phil, and a sister, Florence, who we called Babe. And I was an only child, so my cousin Mickey, who was Babe's kid, was 9 months older than me, and his first words out of his mouth when he saw me was "son of a bitch" at the hospital. At least that's the story I'm told.
Yeah.
And Mickey and I are more like brothers than we are cousins. When Miami changed, the whole nature of the city I was living in 1958, Castro took over. We lost the plantation in Santiago de Cuba. And I'd been around weekends around the Cuban people and everything, but it changed when the Castro took over and the flood of Cubans infiltrated Miami. They're very industrious people, and they basically took over the city. It's not like when the Jews came over from Europe and they assimilated. Today, you go to Miami, people who were born here, some of them don't speak English. They're educated in Spanish. They watch television in Spanish. They have radios in Spanish, newspapers in Spanish. And it's like being, Miami's called North Cuba. And in 1968, the Orange Bowl would always have a fireworks pageant. And all the bands after the parade, 4 or 5 days after New Year's. Marilyn and I went there, we were married for 3 years there. And the whole commentary was in Spanish. And they combined it with the Three Kings Festival. And I said to Marilyn at that point, this is not the city I grew up in anymore. And then several incidents happened. Marilyn was working as an orthoptist at Bascom Pomeroy Institute. My grandmother died, and I happened to be in the hospital that weekend. And she picked me up from the hospital. And I said, Marilyn, what's the rattling in the car? Well, the hospital was like 2 miles from the funeral home. We got to the funeral home, made a right turn, and our front tire fell off. Someone was trying to steal the tires in the employee lot and just put the hubcap on when they saw us coming. So that really soured me on everything. And then when we got married, we got married in Dallas in '74 at Temple Emmanuel, and I scandalized my mother-in-law because I refused to get married without a ketubah and the rabbi wearing a tallis and yarmulke. And Rabbi Klein at the time told my wife, well, he's going to make you a chattel. You don't need this paper. You're a modern woman. Well, I guess I was too stubborn. And I said to Rabbi Klein, Rabbi Klein, that's fine with me. If you don't want to marry us, I'll find somebody else to do it. And my mother-in-law was scandalized. How could I speak to the rabbi that way? I said, well, I'm Jewish, and this is what I believe in, and this is how it's going to happen, or there won't be a wedding. Needless to say, you knew your aunt. My mother-in-law was a proper Southern lady. I mean, she grew up as a Reformed Jew. I never knew Reformed Judaism before. It was alien to me. And my family didn't consider Reformed Jews Jewish. But.
So did you get your ketubah?
We got our ketubah.
And
Your
did
father
Rabbi
got it for us.
I do remember that now that you say that. Rabbi Klein married you.
Yes.
Yes.
He reluctantly wore a kippah and a tallis. And he promptly took it off as soon as the ceremony was over.
And you guys just celebrated your 50th wedding
We just had our
anniversary.
50th anniversary.
Yeah.
Actually, we had our brunch to the hour when we were married.
That's lovely.
It was amazing. But, my mom, the family is interesting. My dad was 15 years older than my mom. He met my mom through my grandfather. My dad was my grandfather's attorney.
Oh my gosh, okay.
And they had businesses together, and during World War II, my grandfather and my dad owned a motel in Key West, and it was a regular business, had a restaurant, and in back had a house of service, the servicemen that were there.
You mentioned, going back there, that they all ended up in Florida, but did they come through Ellis Island and get to Florida, or they got off a boat in Miami?
My grandfather came to the States from Canada. He got on a freight train and just rode it across the border. And we realized when he was about 50 or 60 years old, I remember a big thing trying to get him citizenship. No, we didn't realize that he wasn't a citizen. And my mother and my father and my aunt were very hard. In fact, my father knew a lot of people in Congress. and was able to get my grandfather U.S. citizenship. Now, my grandmother, she came in from Austria. They were both from Austria, and they were second cousins. And her father and my grandfather's father had a doll factory in Vienna and one in Montreal. And they would go back and forth to Europe. And my mother would write to them in Yiddish. And unfortunately, my grandmother pleaded with the two of them to bring the families over.
Yeah.
But my great-grandmothers, they said, why would we, nothing's going to happen to us here. We've got servants, we've got, we have a very good life here. Why would we want them to move to a non-Jewish country? In their hell, they didn't know anybody but Jews. So my grandmother always blamed herself that we lost the whole family. My grandfather had one first cousin who lived in Montreal, and we would go back and forth, and a great uncle. And the big story about my great uncle was he got married when he was 95 years old and had a baby when he was 103.
It's like a Bible story.
This was like fifth or sixth wife. I mean, my grandfather used to say, Uncle Max, who are you married to this year?
Oh my gosh.
But, he had a full head of hair. It was 6'1", 6'2", which was very unusual in those years.
Yeah.
And, so my mom that was born in New York, and very quickly they moved to Florida. My grandfather opened a high-grade provision house, and that was his business. He used to supply all the pickled meats to Wolfie's and Rascal House, and I know on several Sundays, me and my older two cousins, we would go and help pickle the meat. And to this day, I still can't eat tongue. It just grosses me out. But anyway, long story short, Marilyn was working at Vassar Palmer Eye Institute as an orthoptist when I married her. And my father-in-law, Jerome Byers, and I think at the instigation of my mother-in-law, we would be out in Dallas every weekend, about every third or fourth weekend. They had my wife, her sister, and her brother, and her parents owned Jomar Optical, which was the eyeglass shop and they were on the board of directors. So we had frequent board meetings, because my mother-in-law was, well, as long as I can tax deduct it, it's okay.
So Joe was for Joan, and the Mar was for Mark. You
Mark
said
and
Joe Mar,
Marilyn.
yeah. Oh, from Maryland. Okay,
Both of them.
yeah. Okay, I didn't know that.
So we had all these fun, weekends. And, I'm a CPA, and every time we came out to Dallas, my mother would have somehow I'd wind up meeting somebody.
So you're starting to like it here.
Well, I could speak English here,
Yeah, okay.
and I could compete.
So, So how many years were you married with Marilyn when you decided to move here?
Well, we got married on December 29th of 74, and we moved here August 6th of 78.
Okay. And when
Yeah.
you started, so you moved here, and you're a CPA, you started work with?
Henry Pearson. I started with Henry, and he knew that if I wasn't a partner in a year, I wouldn't be there. So, you know, we had our CPA firm, first called Henry R. Pearson Inc., then H. Pearson and Company. And then I finally retired him in 2001 because he wanted to do it, retire, and paid him a significant amount of money for his portion of the business. Well, unfortunately, Hank decided that he wanted to go back into practice after I paid him for all the clients. And we went to the two biggest son of a bitch attorneys, and we spent over $1 million in legal fees over 2.5 years till Hank finally settled, and paid me all my legal fees and then damages. But it was a nasty business divorce.
Hard. Yeah, that's hard.
And a lot of our clients, I would say the majority of the clients understood and didn't want to have anything more to do with Hank. But, this happened in 2001. David was just starting University of Miami. My son David, he was third generation going to University of Miami. And then my grandson, David's son, our own, he may be the fourth generation going there. Although I think at University of Central Florida, he wants to do photography and production and marketing. And Central Florida has a bigger department, and at this point they have more. My son, I have two sons that are Shomer Shabbos. My oldest one just got smicha.
Which means?
David.
I know, but you just said that.
Smicha.
Yeah.
He's a rabbi now.
Oh, okay.
We went down he arranged for his ordination to be on my birthday this year.
That's wonderful.
So we were down there for that. And
so let's mention too. So mention his wife's name. David's wife. Melissa, and so the grandsons are Rome, and you have a granddaughter.
Rachel Malka.
Okay, Rachel Malka.
Or now she wants to be called Rachel.
And how old is she?
Rocky is 16.
Okay.
And Aaron's 18.
And then they moved back. So you said they were living here, and they moved back.
They were living here, and then they wanted more in Dallas. They had one opportunity of a school, and at the time, Akiba wasn't really as academically advanced as it should be, and they wanted more opportunity. So they went down to South Florida, settled in Coral Springs, and they had a choice of 5 schools.
That's wonderful. Okay, now we're going to go to second son.
My second son.
Second born, yeah.
My second born is Evan, and Evan gave me the biggest scare in my life. He was born at 32, 33 weeks, and I remember the night he was born. All I did is sign papers outside the NICU. He's going to have this and this, and they told us, and it almost worked out. He's going to have pneumonia by the time he's X, and he's going to have this, and he's going to have delayed. And as it turned out, he's got a master's in social work. He's got a master's in accounting, and Evan is now running the administrative side of our firm, plus doing accounting work. David is running the firm. We're a virtual firm. We went virtual before COVID. So we had an edge up on everybody else because, we decided, we didn't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on rent. And we could service our clients. We taught our clients how to become computer savvy, and basically we talk to clients on the computer, and people, and they really appreciate it because they don't have to interrupt their day to go out.
That's great.
And it's worked out to be a very good model for our business. On top of that, we have since I was working on a cruise ship, during college, and I was a varsity debater for University of Miami, and I came up with this idea to host a national tournament in Miami, and we put it on a cruise ship. So we started a travel agency in Dallas in 1990, and the boys all have an interest in it, and that's their avocation now. We don't have brick and mortar anymore, but we still do all the travel. And we have somewhat of a captive audience with our clientele also.
That's great. Now, we're still talking about Evan. He's married.
He's
and
married, has
kids.
2 children.
Okay, and what are their names? What's everybody's name?
Alexander David and Becca Noah,
Okay,
or Rebecca.
and Evan's wife's name?
Is Suzanne.
Okay. And they're in Dallas with you.
Right, yeah. And Suzanne, Evan wanted to come home, so he settled in Dallas. And his wife is from Huntington Beach, California, but went to the women's school, Yeshiva University, and got a master's in political science. And she is the social media director for what's the name of it now? NJOP. And Suzanne developed Hebrew Across America.
And what is that?
It's a national program to help synagogues and schools teach Hebrew
Wonderful.
to everybody. And she does a lot of fundraising and social media. She was 30 under 30. She's just very, very, she is known within the Jewish philanthropy world.
That's wonderful.
And
How old are their children?
Alex is 9,
Uh-huh.
and Becca is 13,
Yeah, because you remember.
just
about
turning
that
on
stuff.
14.
Okay.
She'll be 14 in February.
And son number 3.
Son number 3 is Michael, and Michael went to University of Missouri. We took him to Miami, and he decided not to go there. He wanted radio, television, sports, and Missouri was the #1 radio, television, sports school. And he was among 10 students in his freshman year that were directly admitted to the journalism school. So he was in the journalism school his whole time. And Michael's when he got out of school, he floated for about 2 months. He worked up at a television station up in Denton that he would run back and forth to every day, and for virtually no money. I think they paid him minimum wage because, if you want to get into sports broadcasting, every teenage boy wants to do that. And then I had a client who was big in the radio television industry. He met Michael, he liked Michael, and he introduced him to a friend who used to live in Dallas and was the station manager for ESPN in Singapore. She and Michael had a video interview, and she paid for him to move to Singapore. And he made more than anybody else in the family for a year and a half.
So that's how long
Basically
he got
tax-free.
And that's how he was there for a year and a half.
Well, he was there for 5 years.
Oh, 5 years. And he married like his high school sweetheart.
Michael met his wife at Plano West. Well, and through, all my boys were very big in ACA. They were very active in ACA. And they were also active in the Orthodox. They were followers of Rabbi Lashak, who, God bless him, if he said the kids were going back at 9 o'clock, by midnight you start worrying where they were. Anyway, but so they were, Michael pursued radio, television, worked for ESPN for 5 years. And then when they decided to have children, Amanda and he wanted to be back in Texas to be around their parents and family, a support group. They settled in Houston. That's where he got a job. And everything was great until they were in Houston 3 months and his in-laws decided to move to Los Angeles, which upset my daughter-in-law to no extent. And then Amanda's family were culturally Jewish. I don't think they didn't step in a synagogue in 40 years. After he graduated at Kiba, I think he became totally disillusioned. And both of them really could care less. And they accuse us of converting Amanda because her mother was shocked and I was shocked that they joined United UOS in Houston, which is the Orthodox synagogue, and Amanda was just the first 2 years they were down there. She was, especially when Michael was working nights, she was so busy taking classes. It was amazing.
That's nice.
We would go down there to visit, and no, I can't go to dinner tonight because I've got a class.
And who are their children? What's their names and how old are they?
We have Emmett Hayes, Hayes is after Hazel, and Sophie.
That's great.
Sophie is going to be 9 years old, and Emmett is in kindergarten, 5 years old.
That's what your family is wonderful. Tell me, we were going back to what you've been doing here. I know that you've been so active in civic and Jewish organizations and many of the synagogues here too, and I really want to include that in here.
Well, when we moved to here, Marilyn's family was very big in Tiferet Israel. Her grandfather, great-grandfather, Frank Byers, was the first president of Tiferet Israel. And then your father was a president of Tiferet, and it's the Donsky or Donsky. I should know. I can't remember the name. But if you go to the family cemetery plot out at Tiferet Israel, they're all in the front.
Right.
Tobolowsky, Dosky, Rachowski, somehow Byers got in there. I'm not sure how, but if the name got changed when Frank came here, or
well, Byers, his wife, Fanny Skybolt, married a Rachowski and married a Tobolowsky, and that's how we've all got related over that site.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when I first came out here, Marilyn wanted me to meet her parents, I thought everybody in Dallas was related to her. You know,
Practically, yes.
I think there was, your mother and Jerome had 64 first cousins.
Yeah. I didn't realize that number, but that makes sense. There were that
In
many.
fact, right now, we're my cousin who lives in Miami, Mickey, became best friends with David Topolowski.
Yes.
So now we see David and his wife when we go to Florida. And
Going back, so you mentioned Tiferet Israel. What tell me organizations and things that you've been involved with, because I feel like you took on a lot of different leadership roles and were very active.
I was very active at Sheriff. I served as president of the Brotherhood for probably 15, 18 years. In fact, I was president of the Brotherhood when we decided to move to Tiferet. Marilyn and I decided to leave Sheriff and move to Tiferet because Sheriff was getting too liberal for me. You know, I was raised in a conservative shul, but by today's standard, it would be Orthodox. You know, men were downstairs and women and children were upstairs.
But you've been so supportive of so many causes here.
I'm in HUD, Hebrew Order of David, and I've been in B'nai B'rith Men. I've been in some federation, but I really don't support federation. I was active here at the JCC for several years. You know, Marilyn was very active in ORT, so we were big supporters of ORT when we were younger. And Hadassah. Those are the organizations we're really active in.
Well, I mean, it's been years, but I seem like you always.
And then when we moved to North Dallas in 1990, we saw a lot what we liked, and we built a house there. And at the time, I didn't realize it wasn't Dallas County. All of a sudden, I'm now in Collin County, and I was raised as a Southern Democrat. You know, my uncle at one point was Attorney General of Florida for a while.
And what's his name?
Minton Rosenhouse.
Okay.
And, you know.
So you've been active in the politics part of
You
that.
know, Claude Pepper was my Uncle Claude. You know, I was a page in the U.S. House for Dante Fasel. George Mathers was a friend of the family's. Dr. King, president of Miami, was my aunt's best friend. So I was active, and when I was young, we were, you know, very politically active against the war. Robert Kennedy was one of our favorites, and, you know, we started an organization called Young Democrats for a New Society, and we were part of the movement that ousted Johnson from running for president.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, I never was happy about having asthma as a kid, but both my cousin Mickey and I, and, you know, living in South Florida, we would make it to the hospital 2-3 times a year in tents next to each other. And then when we got to be 19, we were sophomores at the University of Miami. My draft number turned out to be 47 and his was 76. So we knew that as soon as we graduated, we got to take a tour to South Asia. So at that point, if you had a student deferment, you were automatically eligible to be drafted until you were age 40. And I didn't want to get out of school and, you know, have a family and be drafted. And I went to military school in Miami, and I knew I didn't want to go in as anything other than as an officer. So we gave up our deferments and got our notice to be come for physical. And thank God we had a cold snap in Florida. The temperature got down into the 40s and rain. And Mickey and I went running on Miami Beach until our nail beds were blue. And we showed up at the Veterans Administration Hospital for our physicals. And the doctors thought we took medication and they put us in the hospital, did toxicology on us, and we got rated 1Y, which means we could be drafted after the women and children.
Now that's a story that I've never heard.
But, you know, I think we would have been a burden had we been drafted.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that, see, you were during the Vietnam War. It was very much a part of what was happening in your life.
I grew up with a high school during the Vietnam War and college, and many of my high school classmates, there were 356 of us, 102 of us were killed or maimed.
So, Minty, we were just talking about your experience that you were in high school and college and when the Vietnam War was going on, and any other comment about that?
Yeah, it made me realize, and then in college, you know, becoming a CPA, the value of money and how you don't want to waste it. And I got somewhat converted towards fiscal conservatism. You know, if I describe myself, I'm a fiscal conservative and a social moderate. That falls in line to I used to be a Rockefeller Republican. But when we moved, I was telling you, when we moved to our new house, I realized we were in Collin County. And especially when we moved in 1990, Collin County had just turned from Democrat to Republican. And I didn't meet any Democrats in Collin County. And I wanted to be politically active, so I joined the Republican Party and became a precinct captain, and then was elected to the Collin County Republican Executive Committee, and I became the treasurer of Collin County Republicans, and they were getting upset with me towards after 10, 12 years because I believed the woman had a right to determine her own destiny. You know, I don't believe that abortion as a means of birth control is abhorrent and it violates Jewish law. But for the health of the mother or the babe, you know, the Jewish law says it's okay. And that's where we are. And they decided I was what they called a rhino, Republican in name only. And that's when we moved to Dallas County. We had a 4,500 square foot house, and after I had COVID, I spent 9 days in the hospital and finally made it out because the administrator just came about. I got it 4 days before Trump did. And it left me with severe breathing problems and severe attack by joints. And and when we built our house, it was a great house. It was built in an L shape. You know, Marilyn and I had our bedroom suite. We had our own sitting room, living room, entertainment area. And the boys had 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms and their own den. And theirs was built over a triple garage. So whatever noise they made really didn't disturb us. We had many AZA sleepovers there until one incident, and we didn't have them anymore.
Tell me, speaking of that, really, since when you moved here, and how do you feel any changes you've seen in Dallas?
Oh yeah, I think. Well, when we moved here, there were 3 synagogues. Emmanuel, well, I guess 4. There was Temple Emmanuel, Temple Shalom, which was brand new, Shereth Israel, and Tiferet Israel. And Tiferet was the Orthodox shul, and Shereth was the conservative shul. And at the time, the only real religious differences was that although most people at Tiferet drove to synagogue, the rabbi discouraged it. At Shereth, the rabbi drove to the synagogue. But other than that, the two were pretty much the same. Rabbi Dabrowski came to Dallas, now I think it's about 30 years ago, and started Chabad, and Rabbi Roden started Ohev Shalom up in North Dallas, and it was actually when we decided to leave Tiferet, because my kids were going to Yavna, and a lot of their friends now were up in the north end that were all Ohev, so we gravitated towards that and maintained our other 3 synagogue memberships. And Ohev has now become a black hat shul. And there's another Orthodox synagogue, and my kids refer to Rabbi Sion's Sephardi world across from Chabad of Dallas. We have just seen a plethora of young Jewish families moving to Dallas. And, we have, when I moved to Dallas, the only place you got anything kosher was Reichman's, and you were scared to eat the meat because he stood over the meat cutting it with a cigarette in his hands. And I grew up in the wholesale side of the meat business, and I couldn't believe that the health department let him do that. But we still bought from him. Yeah. And then, Tom Thumby opened a kosher butcher shop and put Reichman's and his successor out of business. And, so now in Dallas-Fort Worth, there's 3 or 4 kosher butcher shops, 5 or 6 kosher restaurants. I mean, it's become much easier to be kosher in Dallas than it used to be. And I admit we go to restaurants. My wife only eats fish outside of the house. And Dallas has just become a much more Jewish welcoming area. And our governor is totally for Jewish people. He has expelled about 15 or 20 people from the Texas college system for being actively anti-Semitic. And he has an executive order that any of the professors who spout anti-Semitic things will be terminated immediately. And, Greg Abbott is not my favorite person as a governor, but I admire everything he's done. Texas Treasury, I learned years ago, is heavily invested in Israeli bonds. I mean, Texas has become very Jewish friendly, and you don't hear the anti-Semitism that you do in the North.
So you find this is a really good place to live?
What?
It's a good place to live.
Yeah, I found, when I was 9 years old, my dad got appointed to a capital murder trial. And he was not a defense attorney, but he was one of Judge Weishart's friends, and the judge said, "Dave, I need you to do me a favor." And he took on this African American's trial of murdering a white woman. And my dad got him off of was found not guilty. And that was on a Thursday night. On Saturday night, we had gone out for dinner after Havdalah, and we came home, and there was a cross burning in our yard. And they never realized, that was the first time I realized that people don't like Jewish people. And it changed my whole perspective.
Your father and your mom and grandparents and great-grandparents, they've been wonderful role models. And I know you and Marilyn have been wonderful role models to your children and grandchildren. In concluding today, what do you feel like the values that you'd like to share with them? I'm sure you've shown them by your action and behavior and talked with them, but what would you like to say about that?
That all men are created equal. That it doesn't matter what your color your skin is or what your background is. If you're a moral person, a righteous person, you believe in God, and you practice your religion, I want my grandchildren's children to marry Jewish people and have Jewish grandchildren. That will satisfy my role in life. I want our community to grow and be a beacon of light for the world. I think we now have some very good clergy in Dallas that really are out to create a bigger and active community. And that's what I want.
Well, Minty, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And it's been very special for me to get to be part of this and to get to be the one to
Well, you've
interview
learned
you.
something that you've never known.
Yes. Thank you so much.